Executive Director of our program, the Virginia Workforce Innovation and Entrepreneurship Center. Prior to that, I was Department Chair of the Business Administration Department. So BWIC is actually a federally funded grant. A colleague and I in 2020 received $17 million to set up an entrepreneurship center at Hampton. That grant was supposed to be for 3 years. We are now officially going into our 5th year.
Wow.
We had 2 years of no cost extension to that. We are assisting people in the entire state of Virginia with their entrepreneurial journey. So literally, if you were affected by COVID, and when they say no, we call them and say, where were you? You have to be a resident of Virginia, and you have to want to start a business or own a business. And you can come through the program. We have about 50 courses. We have about 6 tracks, one being product development with Eunice. And we do everything free of cost for the participants. We also help them with that financial journey as they go through the different phases. They end up at the end having about $3,000 of cash that they can take and invest into their business. And so we are trying to take away those barriers that you talked about, changing the mindset that you talked about, and also make them understand that entrepreneurship, like was just discussed, is not just about the financial part of it.
Awesome. So I'm sure you all have some questions. So does anyone have any questions right now? Okay, well I'll start. I want to get from you all, what are your thoughts on how entrepreneurs, or those that are, they may not be entrepreneurial, but what can they do to, start looking at entrepreneurship as a segue into building dynastic wealth?
Let me go first.
Yes. I don't want to take up too much of my.
So much of what Dr. White was talking about resonated with me because you talked about my grandmother. So she would work as a housekeeper at Riverside during the day. She stopped working when I was born and stayed with me until 5, then she went back. But during the time that she stayed with me, she turned her kitchen into a hair salon. And I worked the front door. If they had a bill, she wasn't available. After a certain date, they didn't pay their way. They had books back then. And if they had paid their bill, then, you could come back in an hour or so. I had to look and see where she was and whose hair she was doing and how much longer she might have and estimate how much time it comes back to that person, right? But she passed 5 years ago. She would never tell you she was an entrepreneur because she just didn't see it that way. She was making ends meet, right? So I always ask people, when you need something and you can't get it from anybody else when it comes to finances, how do you get it? If you do it in a way that can translate to a business, you're already starting your entrepreneurial journey. For me, it was baking. It was cakes. When I had my child, I did not want to go to work until they can tell me what was happening to them in the daycare. I was overprotective. And so my husband and I had an agreement when I had that child that I would stay home. And what did I like to do? I baked. Today, many years later, my baby is 24. I'm baking cakes, y'all, and sell them at the farmer's market, right? And so 25 years later, it has come back around to, okay, I could really make a business out of this because I've been doing it on the side. So really think about the thing that makes you happy, the things that affects other people, that makes them happy when they do it. And you have already started your entrepreneurial journey, and just take it and make it official at that point.
I also like to kind of going back to the legacy motivation, right? So that the kids don't want to take over the business. So one thing about dynastic families is you instill the entrepreneurial mindset, so they don't have to take over that business, but maybe that business is maybe it has an outdated model anyway, especially as we get ready and begin to really find ourselves involved in this fourth industrial revolution, where that need for technology is essential if you're going to keep your doors open or your virtual doors. So in this journey to dynastic wealth, it's about really ensuring that our children and this rising generation, as they call it, so maybe nieces and nephews or god sisters or kids in the neighborhood that look up to you and always knocking on your door kind of thing. If people still do that, I don't know. Like, they probably just send you a text message or something. But a part of it is ensuring that we feel empowered enough to either revamp an existing business model or acquire a business. Now, that's one thing that we hadn't talked about at all, is entrepreneurship through acquisition. Because if you've started your own business 30 years ago, and it probably has not gotten any easier, right? But think about if the next generation or the nieces and nephews or the godchildren know that they can buy a business that's already generating revenue, right? What would that mean for your family and for that journey to dynastic wealth?
Awesome. So when I was thinking about this, creating this panel and this event, beauty and wellness, in reference to women of color, my thoughts were, well, financial is directly related to our overall ability to have access to wellness. There has to be a financial wellness component. And so that's where I thought, okay, dynastic wealth definitely, is a place that talks about that. So what, in your minds, as women of color, how do we incorporate a lot of things that you talked about as far as financial wellness for the family?
So I have to say this. I'm a social scientist, okay? So this is coming from my heart. Our relationship with money will dictate a lot about our future with money. So if we don't feel like I deserve this, I'm worthy of this, then it'll flow through your hands like water. But if we have a healthy enough relationship with money that says, this is my birthright. And when we recognize any birthright, we take care of it, right? We do what we need to do to ensure that it, because money is energy. And when we have positive, healthy energy towards anything, it multiplies. And it does so, it multiplies in a way that is, again, in service to others. And so remember, I'm a social scientist. So, and I have to say that because so much of the time when you're learning, especially in the academy, when you're talking about business, it's to make a profit, to provide for the shareholders. But what about for the people that you serve? What about for the people whose problem you're solving? What about for the people who you may be sacrificing time with them to generate this profit? And I think for me, a huge part of financial wellness is understanding our own narrative and relationship with money. What have been phenomenology, right? What have been the lived experiences that dictate how we work with money or how we don't?
Adding to that is based on self-worth. That's everything that you talked about, right? So it's a generational, it's a mindset shift because we associate being wealthy and money with things that we wear, things that we eat, not actually building a platform for our next generation to jump off of, right? So for me, it's very important to make sure that my kids don't start out the way that I started out. And I cannot do that if I'm buying every purse that TikTok tells me to do it, right? I cannot do that if just because the new Jordans dropped, I have to actually go and get them. I will get them, but they were on the sale rack, right? And so it's a mental mind shift of, I have this money, what is going to be best for me when it comes to this money, and how can I make it grow for me later? A trust is what we all should be thinking about when it comes to money. Just like you talked about, I want to have a pool of money, not that my kids can control 100%, because that's stress on them.
Right.
But if you have, like she talked about, a trust with rules, I'm impacting those that are coming behind me before they're even here, right? You can start as easy as getting a savings plan for your grandchild. At the first year that they're born, it might cost you $25 a month, right? But you've taken the burden off of your child to have tuition for their child when they get to that space, and they can take that and they can grow money even more, right? And so it's just changing the mindset of even if I make this money today, do I necessarily have to spend this money today on myself? Not at all. I can take a part of it, and even if I want to splurge and do something for myself, a portion of that should be going into something that benefits those that are coming behind you.
So you talk about a shift in mindset. What things have you had to do to teach your entrepreneurs in your program to shift their mindsets?
Okay, I'm gonna lean on personal. This is my personal opinion and not the opinion of the Virginia Workforce Innovation and Entrepreneurship Center. First, I have to give that disclaimer. So, switching the mindset has been hard. In this program, literally, they are given access within a month to an accountant that has been in business over 20 years. They personally have a marketing person that has been in business over 20 years. They get a banker that is an active banker. They get one or two that is connected with them. Every single aspect of business, every class that we took in undergrad for business, they get somebody that is directly tied to that space. You can get an insurance policy at a discount. You can open up your business account for $5 and get free investment stuff, right? But do you know the calls that we get the most?
Yeah.
Where's my stipend? 95% is worried about the check that they already earned, right?
Yeah.
Not all of the actual resources that are there. Wealth is about connections. It's about networking. If you are not networking with all the people that you meet, 50 people during the course of a year, and you haven't reached out to them for any of the resources, you haven't shifted your mindset, right? You're worried about money you already earned that you know is coming. I can't keep it. I have to give it away. But just switching the mindset of, oh my God, I need my resources are way more valuable than the $500 that I can see and put into my bank account. That's been the biggest struggle for me.
Wow. And what's the reason behind that there's a focus on the stipend? Is it because they have a need for it personally or in business, or?
I'm gonna say it's a lack of trust.
Oh.
So we service everyone. We love to service everyone, right? But I have noticed that the majority of us have a lack of trust. They don't trust that the money is coming. We may have scammed them.
I can agree with that. Even organizing this event,
Yeah.
I had people call me to make sure it wasn't a scam.
Yes. Yeah. And so
A free event.
right. And a free program.
Yeah.
Well, all we ask you to do is time and build your business plan. Literally, you're writing your business plan throughout the whole thing, right? And then, so let's say they do the first 5 things, which is taking an entrepreneurship course, which they get a certificate from, creating a W-9, which is starting your tax records, which is great for when you want to get a loan or your banker, right? with making sure that you are in existence, writing a value proposition canvas, which is creating your business and a business canvas, right? And then when you finish that, then we're unleashing you to all of these professionals.
Wow.
But all you can focus on is I did this and I don't have my $500 yet.
Yeah.
And it's a trust thing because we, you know, we haven't been in situations where trust is easy, right? And so I think that's what it is. And I think when they start to, and we're also virtual, right? So a lot of them haven't actually seen us to know who we are. But once we get them in and they start seeing us and understanding that we are people that with similar backgrounds. I'm from downtown Newport News, born and raised. And so it's like, hey, my family probably lives next door to you, right? I'm not trying to take anything from you. So I think that's where it stems from. And it's a hard thing to break.
So speaking on trust, Dr. White, what, I know when your family started to form the group where you guys can have these conversations, initially it was challenging.
It still
Can you
is.
talk about that? the process to get
Right.
everybody on board and to trust one another.
Right. Thank you for that. So in the pandemic, this would have been April of 2020. My sorority actually our national chaplain issued a prayer calendar, and I have two ministers. Well, now a pastor and a minister, and then one aunt who has a nonprofit that teaches the principles of Christianity in public schools in Brevard County. I was like, separation of church and state, but we'll take it. So, and also my grandmother. So there was a lot of just discussion around scripture and everything. And when the prayer calendar came out, I would just copy and paste the scripture and text it out to everyone. And so one aunt asked, well, what do we just get on Zoom because we hadn't seen everybody? And it started because we were meeting on Zoom, sharing these scriptures and prayers with everyone. And I was just kind of in my literature review for my dissertation where I was learning about structural racism and how it affects Black entrepreneurs. Along the way, Eunice, you introduced me to The Whiteness of Wealth.
Yes, yes.
The Whiteness of Wealth is the book that changed everything because I was, trying to talk about entrepreneurship and what I've been learning about wealth transfer, and everybody would just be like, "Oh, that's just Tanya," right? Because they only know me as Tanya, as this cousin that'll cry at the drop of a hat. That right? That's the only capacity that they know me in. And it was really, to your point, it was really challenging. Like I felt like I was talking to myself. And I literally was just like, I can't even do it. Like I can't keep trying this hard. Because if my goal is to change Black families around the world and I can't make no progress in my own family, maybe I just need to hang it up. And so what happened was Sparrow, she was in kindergarten and she walked by. This was virtual, right? She was in virtual kindergarten. I was teaching online, teaching college students online, and my doctoral program online, and then kindergarten online, like all throughout, for months at a time. But she happened to walk by one day, and it was like I snapped out of it because I was so beholden to what was currently happening in the family that I was sacrificing her future. And it was that I said then, Sparrow, and I said this to her. She had no idea what I was talking about. But I said, if it's just me and you, then that means it's just going to be me and you.
Yes.
And so I kept going. And then I learned about the whiteness of wealth. And what I realized from that book was I had been talking about wealth building through entrepreneurship, but I was the only entrepreneur in the family. So I had been excluding everybody else. They couldn't even see themselves in what I was talking about. But the whiteness of wealth looks at how there have been these barriers to wealth building through education, through home ownership, where we buy our homes, which impacts where our kids go to school, which plays a role in how much they're ready for college, which impacts how they can be positioned for career opportunities. And so there was somebody that was in different points on that wealth journey in every part of the family. And that's when everybody could like let their guard downs. That's when they could relax, because it wasn't just me talking at them. It was like, let's talk about this together. Now I do have to this day, you got that one uncle, right? And so I remember being 8 years old, telling my mom, I was like, "Ma, I don't think he liked me," right? Because he was so like stoic and standoffish. But through this process, I had the privilege of learning more about his lived experience.
Wow.
He was the uncle. He's the third oldest, but like the most responsible. He's the one that experienced economic mobility quickest. So he was the uncle everybody came to. And so that wears on you, right? Being the person that people call wears on you. And so I think it just became a part of his like defense mechanism, a part of his own lived experience, like how he protected himself. And so he asked this one question I think was probably the most vulnerable I've ever seen. And he said, well, and it won't sound vulnerable, y'all, but this is just a testament for like how much distance, emotional distance, was between what I see emotional distance. He said, well, what happens if, because we were talking about everybody contributing money to the trust, right? Well, what happens if Ray Sr. decides they don't want to add money to the trust, but Ray the third comes along and makes a request? And that's a valid question.
Very much
I was
so.
thinking the same.
Right. And so we know a part of my family identity, though, is our Christian identity. And so we know that the sins of the father, right, cannot be held against the children. And so a part of dynastic wealth and a part of dynastic wealth is making sure that everyone has equal access. You may not have equal opportunity because maybe you ain't doing what you're supposed to be doing. You haven't been involved. You can't demonstrate a return on investment. But that doesn't mean just because your grandfather did not want to be a part of it, that has nothing to do with you. So that trust we've had to build going back, and also have to build it trying to go forward, like projecting it into the future as well.
Wow. What are your top 3 things that you think every entrepreneur should have in mind as they're developing their businesses? And then I have another question after that about scale. So what are your top 3 things?
What problem do you want to solve? How you are going to solve it? And how you are going to finance it? If you have those 3 things, you have a whole plan in place.
Love that.
I would say, kind of on the financing part, cash flow. Like,
Yes.
my God, today.
Woo! Yes, Lord.
Cash flow projections, right? Like, what are the obligations
Yes.
on your cash? Right? So cash flow projections, building the business in a way that it's not dependent on you. So building it so that it can scale. And then how do you package the business so that even if you don't want to sell it, people find it as an attractive acquisition opportunity. Because you can sell the business to a white person, right?
Yes.
And use that money to build your family's dynasty. We don't have to be
Yes.
mad at Carol's daughter and Robert Johnson. We don't have to do that. And it's okay, because guess what? How many more businesses can we build or acquire?
Yes. Yes. So, okay, let's talk about scaling, because I recently heard one of the founders of the Gathering Spot say that we have to stop thinking about creating a business, and we need to talk more about what does it take to scale a business. Because when you look at the stats, they say that, you know, Black women are starting, you know, more businesses than ever. But when you look deeply into it, it's a single person business. They're not hiring anybody, and they're not making more than, you know, 30,000 a year. So how do we expand our businesses to scale and grow to be compared? And I don't want to say be comparable to, you know, the white businesses, but, you know, how do we make our businesses grow?
Thank you. I think one opportunity for us to scale, kind of going back to recognizing that we're in a new industrial era, right? This is a knowledge-based era now. Wealth is being created based on what you know and how you can multiply the impact of what you know through technology. I think it is important for us to, no matter what your service is, no matter how traditional the service seems, where's the opportunity to build a product or a service or a software that does not depend on your time, your physicality, for you to physically be behind the chair, I think, as it's called, especially in the beauty industry, is here. And so one of the slides that I skipped was on post-traumatic slave syndrome. And there's a connection between how we have been deemed worthy based on what our bodies look like, what they think we can do with our bodies. And now that comes a lot, that still shows up in, you know, what can I do with my hands? What can I do as I'm there in the building kind of thing? But what about the thing that cannot be reproduced until you literally get it documented and put on paper?
Wow, that's good. Dr. Evans?
Mine goes back to that control and trust thing.
Wow.
And I say that because most of us don't scale because we want to control every single aspect of our business.
Yes.
If you're a type A, even if you don't have the money to have employees, right? That networking again that I talked about, you have a board of advisories. Not only do they come for free most of the time, but they will bring their network to the table to sit at the table with you and usually help you more than cost you. And so, you know, to scale, you have to get out of your own way sometimes. I always say when I'm teaching that business model canvas class, when you're thinking about who you want to bring into your space in the future, your first person that you should bring in should be the person exactly opposite of you. They shouldn't think like you do. They may not look like you. They may not talk like you. You might not have the same background. Because at the end of the day, for your business, whoever you bring to the table is who the customers that you're going to bring in, right? And so I don't want all my customers to be type A. It would not be a good relationship between me and my customers, right? But you have to think differently. And you have to be open to maybe doing something that you never thought that you would do. You have to be open to listening to something that might conflict with what it is that you thought was actually happening. Because you may not be as connected to your customers as you think that you are.
Wow. Wow. And so we talk about the transfer of knowledge. Yes. There may be some that they may not necessarily go into business. So for instance, let's say there's some families you see that the father is a doctor, the mother is a doctor, then the kids become doctors, then their kids become doctors. But you see that there was a transfer of knowledge down that impacted the kids and the grandkids going into those fields. So for instance, my question is, how do we transfer that knowledge down to our children, whether it be business knowledge or maybe it may be the knowledge that we have from our own professions into our children and our children's children. I know that for my daughter, I had her come here so she can see the family business. She has to learn how to be a part of that, because I want to start imparting into her the knowledge that I have.
So the wealth of knowledge is actually one of those qualitative forms of wealth, actually. And one of the things that, because we have been, my family, we're spread out, right? We've been getting together on Zoom. So we have the recordings and things of that nature from different sessions, even the session where my uncle asked about Ray the Third, right? So we have that documented. One of the things that happens at the family retreat is, of course, there is that ceremonious opening, reading the family constitution, but each generation is also in their pod. So you have the youngest generation where they're learning about investing, entrepreneurship, business development. They're learning those fundamental skills. Then you have that that rising generation that's really looking at the portfolio analysis review, and then the generation up is looking at the request. But you still come together and have basically like an annual report meeting, right? So on the business side, that is how knowledge is being transferred within dynastic families. And then, of course, you still have your social, right? So it's not to say no more family reunions, but family reunions and family retreats, right? So that you still, because when my grandmother passed, and we've seen these on social media where your mom or your grandma try to make you remember this cousin or that person. I don't know that person. But the more time we spend with each other, the more I remember who that person is. And so that is also the wealth of knowledge. Last thing I'll share is when my great-grandmother, I grew up in Miami, Florida, and our family is concentrated in Tallahassee, Florida. I knew it was summer when it was time to go to Tallahassee, but I knew I was at Medea's house when you smelled those biscuits, right? When she passed, nobody had the recipe.
Whoa.
That's knowledge that was not transferred. And so we don't have the luxury of not transferring even that kind of knowledge anymore.
I agree. You know, I said my grandma passed 5 years ago. The next couple of weeks later, everybody got together and made the food that she used to make, right?
Oh, my goodness.
So my uncle could do the pies. I could do the pot pie and all kinds of stuff, right? And so my answer would be those type of activities with your family.
Yeah.
Each moment is a teaching moment. Even if you're not actually sitting down and having a business meeting, you're teaching them in some type of way. I went to work with my mom probably for years, and my first thing was sort this, put it in alphabetical order, and let me show you where the file cabinets are. All the way to college, I mean, I would go to spend time with her, and I would act like almost an assistant for all the lawyers in the office that she worked in, and that created my network, right? Even though she's not still here, literally the people that she worked with, because I was always in that space with her, I can call them for just about any and everything. And so you're talking about doctors, attorneys, and all kinds of people, right? And so, you know, bring them in the spaces that you're in so they can just see. You don't have to preach it to them or make them sit down and do it in such a structured way. You just have to expose them to the things that you're doing, and it will make a way. My grandma that did hair, I would say she had 9 kids. I always say I was the 10th kid because I came so quickly after the rest of her kids. But I think that 85% of my cousins have their own businesses. And it's because we saw her have her own business, and my aunts and uncles had their own businesses because it was just something that we thought was normal and the way for you to make your ends meet, right? So just put them in the space and let them see what it is that you're doing.
All right, so I'm gonna open the floor for questions. Anyone has any questions?
And thank you all for your engagement and your responses, your contributions to the conversation.
Okay, hi, my name is Lisa Gaffins, and my question is, I love everything that you all talked about in terms of family. I am a part of a large family, but it's broken.
Yep.
And I understand that everybody
Yep.
is not, okay? But for me, I feel like I've wasted so much time trying to bring everybody. You understand? I'm an adult. I have 7 kids. It's 19, 20 kids between, my mom and my dad. They had 3 girls, and everybody's kind of broken off. So recently, my husband and I have just decided, because we've been talking and fighting about, we need a trust, because I've said here recently, I want my grandchildren's grandchildren's grandchildren. You just gave me confirmation that I'm right.
Yes, ma'am.
I want my
Yes.
I want them to say, hey, Lisa, Auntie Lisa, Grandma Lisa, whoever Lisa, she helped us start this. I don't want them to have to ever be born into this world and not, they have to worry like I did. Now, my mom is still alive. My grandmother she's 89 years old. I'm blessed to have had a chance to spend time with my great-great-grandma, my grandma, my great-great, I've had the chance to do this. And I have a lot of stuff written down. I have a lot of stuff in videos that I have kept over the years. Like my grandma, she makes medicine. And baby, let me tell you, it makes some medicine. So it's a Gullah Geechee type situation. Where I am now is my children, I'm a commercial truck driver by trade before I started becoming an esthetician. So I'm making $3,000 and $4,000 a week. They're in the truck with me. I feel like I inculcated all of that stuff into them. But now that they're older, it's just like, whatever, whatever. We don't have time for that. So I have one, the 10-year-old. She's the last baby. the kid above her is 22. And then my daughter, Madison, is autistic, so she's with me. How do I now take the 4 of us? Because that's what it's going to be. I'm okay that it's not going to be everybody, okay? How do I now take the knowledge that I have, because I know we need a trust, I know we need these insurance policies to start this generational wealth off, and I'm just not one of them ones. I'm not into, I don't wear no Jordans. If I can't get it from the DAV,
I know that's right.
So I'm sorry, I can't, if it ain't my name that's on the jeans, we ain't doing it. So what do I do to get this thing started? I want this thing, because I'm 53, like no day is promised to nobody. And I expect, okay, I want to live 50 more years. But I'm just saying the reality of it is I need to build something now that will sustain me and make sure that they have what they need. Can you tell me where I need to start?
I would first say, give yourself grace.
Absolutely.
That's hard.
Give yourself grace. And it is hard, right? Because we've been conditioned to believe we don't deserve it. So everything is by, Eunice and I were talking about this earlier. We know the system, if you don't know, leaving here today, the system is not broken. The system is working the way it was designed to work, to make you think you're not worthy, to make you think you don't deserve grace, to make you think that you need to be physically in a space and that your physical presence is the value of you, right? That's what the system is designed to do, to break apart our families, to make us not understand money, to take away our power when it comes to wealth building and wealth transfer. Don't let the system win. You are at a place where you can build a new system for your family. Entrusted. That's one book that might help to give you the language. So as in the activities that my family and I did to build out like our family constitution, our family identity, we just took the steps from Entrusted. So that's a book, and I think on the full slide deck you get access, like you can click one of those pictures and it'll take you to Amazon. But when I work with Black families, what I do is kind of facilitate a reading circle. And instead of reading the whole book, because not everybody want to read, right? As I've selected what I found to be the most salient, like 3 or 4 chapters. And then that can help to get everything started. And so with your investing in intellectual wealth, that was one step where you're finding out what people's passion, skills, and abilities are. So I have a cousin that's an accountant in California, right? Then I have a cousin I know what corner to find him on any day of the week down in Miami, right? Both their lived experiences are valuable. The accountant, he doesn't contribute any more to the family than my cousin, who through intellectual wealth, I've learned that he's great with his hands, right? So why can't we begin to invest in him to maybe become a general contractor? But guess what? We can't make that investment if we hadn't taken the time to know who he is. So you have the privilege because these are your children. You are watching every day what they're good at, what they love to do, what they have an aversion to, right? And you can use that knowledge, that wealth of knowledge, to pour into and invest in them. What's the youngest that you'll take with the VWIC program?
18.
Okay. But that sounds like a perfect segue, right? Because the other part of it is, it's not you don't have to be the only person to help them develop these skills. You have partners and programs like what Dr. Evans is doing and some of your counterparts across the state and across HBCUs in general.
And I want to echo, give yourself grace, right? And give your kids grace too. Because just like we didn't know what we wanted, 18 is not a magic number.
Right. Right.
For some reason, we have been taught that at 18, you have graduated, you know every single thing in this world, and you can go off and conquer. My husband and I came from that type of space, right? And so we were intentional about not having that space for our kids. And so you could come back home. We paid rent before you left. Our mortgage bill didn't go up because you're in the space. So I don't need you to pay part of my mortgage bill because that's my mortgage bill. But what I need you to do is invest in yourself and do something for yourself.
Yes.
And so that mindset, my daughter is looking for land. My son saved his money up. He financed himself to go to Dallas, and he's in aviation school to go commercial pilot, right? So give them grace, too, to learn who they are and just support them as they do that. But also know you can't save everybody.
Right.
She gave you all the technical stuff.
Right.
You cannot save everybody, and it's okay if you don't. That's the hard part. I was the supporter of my family, right? And I lost my mom in 2019, my dad 2 years ago. And for a long time, I was like, why would this happen? But with that, a lot of stuff that I felt like I had to do, I don't have to do that stuff. And I feel okay, and it's not somebody making me feel like I have to do something. Take the group that you have and start it here, but just be thoughtful of those that you want to help as you are making out those rules and regulations, right? Make sure they have skin in the game. If they want to pull something out, even if it's little, even if it's time, make them put something in. But the most powerful stuff that you will do for people that are against you. Okay? As a PhD, every day I have to go into a room that somebody that I'm in the room advocating for is mad that I'm sitting in the room
Wow.
every single day. Okay? You think about us as a society when a certain person was in office. If somebody went to the table and in that office to talk to a certain person, they were now against the culture. And we know what they were talking about in that space. It didn't have to be a nice meeting. It didn't have to be an agreeable meeting. But somebody has to have skin thick enough to go into the room and take flack for everybody that you went in there to protect, right? And come out the bad guy, just knowing inside of yourself that you're doing it for a good reason. So sit down, do whatever it is that you want to do, and be okay with it, knowing that you're going to impact people that don't understand that you're doing it to impact them. It's okay. Okay.
Thank you, Lisa.
Any other questions? It seems like you have one. I can't really think of it.
Well, I don't have a question, but I'll make a statement.
Yes.
An executive statement. I was just reflecting on, can y'all hear me? So when I came up, my grandmother was only had 8th grade education. And my father her son did receive $10,000 on the GI Bill. And he gave that to her so that she can open, because she knew she was a businesswoman. So he gave that $10,000 to her, and she bought, because she also believed that a black woman should have real estate. So she bought 2 homes, one in Far Rockaway Beach, New York, and the other one in Howard. And it's like what we would call a townhouse today. So the front part of the house was the store, the storefront. Del Monte, Wonder Bread, everybody.
Oh, wow.
But she also had a group of Jewish women that they were also connected very close, who taught her, the bookkeeping, how to save money and stuff like that. And so she didn't have to go to the store, what we have today called organic. She had her own garden with watermelon, collard greens, everything that you would need to feed your family, And what I really loved about it is that she took that one home, because we lived on the first floor. It was the living room, the kitchen, and everything in the back. She had 4 rooms upstairs, and she rented those out to people who was transition into the community or couldn't find a job, And so she instilled it to me is that a black woman should have, first they should have their money, invest. So she had stocks. She watched the stocks and stuff like that, and keep the legacy going on to the next generation. And so this is my little partner over here. and I have been just talking to her throughout her blank years, because she don't need tell. And I'm just so happy to see that she has followed the legacy where she's getting ready to open up her own business and stuff.
Congratulations.
But when she was little, she had a cookie company. Myself and my husband was her employee. Cookies and the gas, the electric and stuff like that. But I do believe to keep the legacy going on throughout the family, if they so desire. Because since COVID, we've been on Zoom with the family, and she has been trying to make them, see the world differently as being entrepreneurs and instill into them the skills and the things that they can do. And so, yet, she hasn't been very successful at that, but I don't think she's going to stop, and so I don't think she's going to stop. And even we had a family reunion, and we have a big family, about 30, for 3 years, this is our 3rd year, and we have not even had 10 people to participate. But next year, 2 years from now, she said we're going to Ghana, and we invited family and friends. So whoever want to come.
I feel like I might be related.
You know.
These might be my cousins over here.
So the thing is, you just have to do what God instills into you to do. But the thing is, sometimes we don't think that people hear, but it's just our job to plant the seed. We have another generation of, my nephew just signed off on a football signing for football for college and stuff like that. So somewhere in that that gene, the family, the legacy of success
Yeah.
is gonna go on.
Yeah.
So you just can't you have to pray your way through
Yeah.
and just send it out to everybody, so it's not like there's discrimination.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just up to whoever wants
Yeah.
to come.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
To sit at the table.
Absolutely.
Yeah, as everybody is thinking, you know, entrepreneurship is scary in some aspects because you're, especially for someone like me that I've worked forever and I've had a steady paycheck, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, in some people's mind, that to them is security, which is something else that in our, you know,
Yep.
for us, security is most important, because a lot of us don't have somebody else to fall back on, right? And so as you're talking to them, right, think about how to frame it in a way or teach them how to go from one space to another and still have that lens of security as they go through. And then you'll have more people that are gonna jump onto that for you.
Any other questions? Well, I want to thank Dr. Evans and Dr. White.